Hi, friends. How are you today? I hope you are doing great. I am so excited to be here with you for episode 2. And let me tell you what, I feel like a giant wave of stress or something has come off of me because episode 1 was really nerve wracking. I cannot tell you how nervous I was to post that. And I don't know, it's like any artist, right? They come out with their art and they're their worst critic. They put it out there and it's just nerve-wracking. I feel a lot better this round. I am so excited to be here and I am so excited to get started and just put all these behind me. I mean, everybody has to have their one episode that they look back on and cringe, right? Maybe that's my episode 1. I don't know. Maybe it's this one. I don't know. We're just going to keep moving on and growing together and getting better. It's going to be awesome. I did want to give you a uh little tiny insert here because as true crimers, we pay attention to everything. And I mean literally everything, the things that other people don't pay attention to. So I'm going to just throw this out here. Not going to make it very long. If you noticed on my first podcast, I said, "Hi, I'm Alicia Cherie." And then you noticed that my page says Heather on it. Here's why. The name Alicia is connected to me, but I don't really use it. Somebody had mentioned that I should use an alias to just protect myself from internet weirdos and that kind of thing, but I don't go by it. I go by Heather. And after I hit publish, I just felt really weird about it. And really, I was like, hey, how are we going to have this like personal relationship with one another if you all think I'm somebody that I'm not? Like I said, I am connected to that name, but I do not use it. I'll explain that someday, maybe down the road. But I was like, I just can't be fake. Like the rest of me can't be like real. And then I'm like saying that I go by Alicia when I go by Heather. So, hi, I'm your Heather, and this is Brewing Murder and Mystery. Moving on. So today's case is one that is really near and dear to my heart. This is the first case that I can actually remember looking back and thinking that there really were bad people out there. Like, I don't know if you can do that, but at that time, like, I don't know how old you are. So maybe you were watching like Unsolved Mysteries, or maybe your parents put on a movie and you just had that moment of like, oh my goodness, like there really are bad people out there. This was that case for me. And frankly, I felt so connected to this child in today's case that if I was in her shoes, I feel like if there was an article written about me, the stories would have been so closely in resemblance. They would have like matched up. And maybe that's why this has been one of those cases that is just stuck in the back of my head because because I just connected with like everything about her. Like when I read about the things that she liked, those are things that I liked. When I talk about who she was, that was really close to who I was. So it was really personal for me, even though it was really far away from me in the sense of I don't know this person or anything like that. That being said, let me give you a trigger warning, okay? I am going to be talking about a 12-year-old girl and some things that have happened to her. And I will also be talking about some animal cruelty situations. So if you do not want to hear about that, that is totally okay. This would be the time for you to jump out. We will connect down the road. And I'm glad that you checked in. And for all the information, I just want to say it's easily accessible by library and internet, and it's all out there. I did not write any new information. I just collected information that was out there, compiled it into this video for you. Please don't come at me. This is all information I found out there, and then just a little bit of my opinion and a little bit of speculation, which hopefully you'll be able to tell in the podcast where that is. That being said, we're going to jump back into the 90s. Probably the best time to be a child and the best time to grow up. I'm pretty sure you agree with me. It was so much fun being a kid in the 90s. Ooh. And that was not yesterday or 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Okay. I got to move on. We're going to talk about Mark and Eve and how they met well, there's not a whole lot of information about how they met. So we know that they met, we know they got married, and then on January 3rd of 1981, they had their one and only little girl, and her name was Polly Hannah Class. She was born in Fairfax, California, and her parents didn't stay together very long after she was born. Her parents basically stated, well, Mark basically stated that even him had a very unsuccessful marriage, but a very successful divorce. He clarifies, meaning that they just weren't really good for each other. And sometimes that just happens, and that they really were better off as friends. And they were really successful at co parenting. And Mark managed to be a constant presence in his daughter's life, even though he no longer lived in the home. Polly was really close to her paternal grandparents, Joe and BJ Class, and they would take her to Mexico and Yellowstone. Sorry, I didn't want to get that wrong. Yellowstone National Park, but she was said to be even closer to her dad, and she just sounds like a total daddy's girl. Eve ended up remarrying a man named Alan Nicole, and Alan had 3 kids from a previous marriage. But then Eve and Alan ended up having one child of their own, who they named Annie. And Polly shared a room. By all accounts, her and Annie just seemed to really enjoy each other, and Polly loved to be a big sister. When Polly reached those teenage years, she was so pretty with her brown eyes, her dimples, and her wavy hair that came just to about her shoulders. Polly liked Mel Gibson as an actor, and of course, back then, who did not like Mel Gibson? I mean, he was a pretty great actor back then and in a ton of movies. But she also had a photograph of football player Joe Montana hanging on her bedroom wall. Her favorite foods were said to be popcorn and hot fudge sundaes, and she had 2 feline fur babies named Milo and Spooky. And I think that is so cute. I really want a black cat named Spooky. Just throwing that out there. She was also very theatrical. She loved to be in school plays and had dreams of acting professionally one day. She also had music as a major interest as she was in the school band. She would even write out scripts and perform them for her family, or even have them videotaped and then rewatch them with her family. One of her friends said that she had a great Elvis impersonation. Comedic and sarcastic, I believe that she probably really would have done well in today's age, and I'm sure she would have just loved the internet and taken all of the acting by storm. She was afraid of the dark and needed a nightlight. Totally can relate when I was a child. But the 90s were this great time to be a kid. Let me paint you this picture. Okay. Think of this. You wake up in the morning, you maybe have some chores, school is out for the day. You're already thinking of whose house you're going to ride your bike to. And you've got this whole entire day planned to just hang out with your friends. I mean, build forts, explore. Maybe you're going to I don't know, sit around and play Nintendo. It was really fun times back then. We didn't have the internet like we have today, so there was no just mindless numbing, staring at our phones while our friends sat next to us, or we just stared into space. I don't know, whatever kids are doing today. But I mean, YouTube was not even a thing. On Saturday mornings, we had cartoons, and a few cartoons played after school, but we didn't have this constant all day nonstop cartoon channels. And local hangouts were skating rinks and arcades. I mean, if you've seen movies of the 80s and 90s, this was a thing. I was at the skating rink every Friday night. It was so much fun. And our friends were there too. It was just this easy task. It was easy to make friends. It was easy to hang out with people. And so imagine these small rural towns in between these large cities. And of course, as you've heard, I'm sure on many true crime cases, we didn't lock our doors. And if we did lock our doors in the summertime, the windows were wide open with that little tiny screen for protection. But we just didn't think about it. It wasn't a big thing. I'm not saying crime wasn't happening, because clearly, the 70s were nuts. but it just wasn't on our minds. It wasn't out there. You couldn't listen to podcast after podcast or YouTube or news that were just full of all these crimes. So it literally was not in our minds. Like we were not thinking about it. The other great thing is we would literally leave a note. Like I would write a note like mom headed to grandma's house. I'd slap that on the counter and then I would just take off. And there was no like constant communication with your parents through your phone, which I don't know how my parents did it. I guess because it was just normal. But if I were to just let my kid just like run out the front door and have no idea where they were until the streetlights came on, I'd probably have a panic attack. But I also know what I know. And if you know, you know. But life was really good back then, basically because it was just simplistic and innocent. As a girl, one of our favorite things to do was have sleepovers. I mean, this was the highlight of my entire week. I kid you not. If I knew I had a sleepover coming on, like there was nothing coming up, there was nothing that you could do to get my mind off of that. I was so excited. If you managed to talk your parents into letting you have more than just one friend come over, it was even that much more amazing. It was like, I mean, I don't know, the equivalent of going clubbing in your like 21, like 20s, 21s. Um, it was just so much fun. And so, of course, girls, we would like do our makeup. We would play board games. We'd always have those crazy games like light as a feather, stiff as a board. You know, we're trying to like do magic. I don't know. We would eat a ton of pizza or ice cream or popcorn. And the worst thing that would happen to you at a sleepover would be like the first one who fell asleep. Yeah, your underwear, it would get put in a bowl of water and put in the freezer. So that was fun. You just didn't fall asleep first. So that was the highlight of our day. Total innocence, giggling, boy talk, prank calls for those of us who were brave enough to do so. And so on October 1st in 1993 in Petaluma, California, when it seemed like just another perfect night for a sleepover, this would not only rock a family, but this would end up rocking an entire country. Polly invited her friends Jillian and Kate over for a sleepover, and the buzz of these three preteen girls just chatting up the whole night, and games, and boys, and eating junk food, and sleeping bags. I mean, this was the highlight of their day. So, this plan was hatched at lunchtime and then set into motion. And when they got home, Annie, who used to sleep with Polly in her room, was going to sleep with her mother room that night so that the big girls could have the room all to themselves. You do not understand unless you were there how awesome that was, because nothing puts a damper on a sleepover like your little sister or your little brother, whoever it is, having to be there with you and your friends. Halloween was just around the corner and they were psyched about their costumes. They were totally planning their routine for the best candy and all the what to do. Polly's mom Eve came in and checked on the girls around 10:30 at night and basically gave them the mom spiel like, "Hey, try to keep it down." She went into her room, took something to help her sleep because she knew that it was not going to happen. Three rowdy girls are not going to be able to stay quiet and keep it down. But shortly after, and I mean really shortly after, between 10:30 and 11, the girls had decided to get their sleeping bags out. Polly's sleeping bag was in another room. So when she opens the door, there's just this stunned, no motion, no moving, because face to face, I kid you not, is a stranger standing on the other side of her door. How terrifying would that be? First of all, you're in your house, not suspecting a thing. Second of all, you're having the time of your life. And then third, you open the door and there's a complete stranger standing there. I would have had a heart attack. Like thinking about that, I would have had a heart attack. So the stranger comes in, this bearded man, and right away, Jillian and Kate kind of think that this might be a prank because, I mean, Polly was kind of dramatic and they were just talking about Halloween. So they thought maybe for a split second that Polly was kind of like setting them up to be scared. But as the man pushed his way into the room, they noticed not only did he have a duffel bag, but a knife. So any thought that they had that this was a prank completely left their mind, and they were terrified. So the bearded man asked the girls who lives here, to which Paula replied, I do. So he tells the girls to get down on the floor and that he's going to start tying them up one by one. If they make any noise, he'll slit their throats. I mean, we're talking about 12-year-old girls here. I'd have peed myself. Like, I'm not even joking. I would have peed myself. But the girls managed to lay on the floor and be quiet. And he used some cloth and he tied their hands up and he gagged them. I guess he put pillowcases over Jillian and Kate's heads and said to count to 1,000. And when they were done, that Polly would be returned. Well, Polly, assuming that maybe he wanted some money, mentioned there was a jewelry box. But when he showed no interest in this jewelry box, she had her worst nightmare confirmed because she realized he was not there for money. He was not there for jewelry. So he must have been there for her. This man instructed Jillian and Kate to count and be quiet. So as soon as they heard the front door close and Polly had left, that's when they were like, we're going to try to get out of these restraints. They tried for a little while, and then one of the girls was able to actually take her hands from behind her back, slide it down behind her bottom, pull her feet out, and get her hands free. And then she helped her friend, and they immediately ran, screaming, Polly is gone, into Eve's room. And Eve is just like awoken, frantic, and immediately calls 911. Police ruled out that the girls were just pranksters and sent out an alert surrounding apartments and got the FBI involved like immediately. They were on it. We have a missing girl kidnapped in the middle of the night from her own room. Like, this was like unheard of. So police found the cloths and the straps that were used to tie up the girls, and they ended up finding a partial palm print, which did not match any of their original suspects. A neighbor assumed that the man that they saw just casually walking up to Polly's driveway and opening the door was somebody that was staying there. He had just walked in like nonchalantly, just matter of fact, with no suspicion arising that he was like a random stranger. So this neighbor had no idea at the time that she had actually witnessed Polly's abduction, which, looking back at that, I don't know if I could sleep knowing that I saw this person that abducted my neighbor's kid and he's just some guy. This made the police think, though, that by that eyewitness account, it had to have been Mark, the father, was the one that took Polly because of this eyewitness account. But Mark and Eve, although they were divorced, Mark didn't have any quarrels with Eve and he loved Polly, and he took a lie detector test or polygraph test and immediately was ruled out as a suspect. This is not uncommon that they go to the family members that are closest to the victim, but there was no reason that Mark would have taken Polly. And 75% of all stranger abductions are usually ending in fatalities. So this really gave the police a reason to like put fire under their butts. Like, you've got to figure this out because her chances of survival are slim picking. Police then focused on the two young girls and were just like, let's get as much detail as we can out of these girls. And they brought in a sketch artist. So the girls kind of put their heads together and they were able to give the sketch artist basically a really good description of the stranger that came in. He was a white man. He had facial hair. He wore a yellow bandana on his head. And the sketch artist came out with a really good description of this abductor. And this is the early 90s. So we're talking the internet was in its infancy stage. I mean, like baby internet. I don't even remember the first time that we got a computer in our house, but it wasn't when I was like a little kid. And even if you had a computer in your house, like, you had to be pretty savvy to know what you were doing. So it was really kind of interesting that they went the route of this was the first missing child case where they utilized the internet and they just wanted as many eyes as possible on this missing child case. This case was downloaded in the US and all around the world over 2 billion digital copies of the image of Polly were out there for the world to see. Like, that is mind blowing at this time because of just, I mean, we're talking like this is the land of fax machines. So other methods were used, like the classical, like traditional methods were used, as in putting up flyers, posting them all around town. They would make t-shirts and buttons and faxes. They would literally fax this to people. And I guess at the time it said in one report that they had even made cassette tapes where they had basically recorded the information and they were handing out cassette tapes, which I didn't know that was a thing. I never heard of that before. But over 8 million pieces of paper were printed out in this initial search, which is incredible. If you think about 8 million pieces of paper plus all the internet downloaded images, like, that's why we knew, because I did not live in Petaluma. I knew because the outreach to find her was so massive. Over 4,000 volunteers were assigned to the search, including helicopter and airplane, and the community of Petaluma set up a headquarters, and they would actually use this for the volunteers to meet together, and they even aided in some other missing children cases at this location. With so many eyes on this case and bringing so much national attention to this case, people just really felt personally involved in this. And even actress Winona Ryder, who was well known at the time, actually originally came from Petaluma, and she was willing to put up an offer $200,000 in reward for any information that successfully aided in bringing home Polly. Ryder basically said that she just felt super connected because she saw a video of Polly acting on the same school stage that she did, and it just really connected her to her youth. And so she just really wanted to have a hand in this case. With all this amount of media attention, it seemed to be a break in the case. There was a call that came in who sounded like a little girl claiming to be Polly, saying that the abductor had stepped out of the room but would be back shortly, and then the call immediately or abruptly cut off. So the police took some time to trace the call, but instead of showing up to a hotel, they basically showed up to your average suburban home. And they found a 17-year-old girl who said she had been dared to make the phone call. As you can imagine, this was pretty devastating for the family because they thought their daughter was about ready to be returned to them. And then to find out that it was just a sick prank phone call was just devastating to know that the nightmare was not over for them. On October 19th, another call came in where a man actually claimed to be holding Polly and demanded ransom money. But because he called the police department directly, not realizing that they had an immediate wiretap, authorities were able to trace his call and find out that this was just another hoax. This guy really did not think his plan through, and his criminal successfulness was very short lived, and he was quickly taken off and arrested. On November 28th, after so many false leads police kept receiving, they finally got a call that would really put a break into this case. Dana Jaffe, she was basically walking around on her property after loggers had come, and she spotted some really weird articles on her property. And I mean, like, items when I say articles. And the detectives who were in the scene of the bedroom incident actually showed up on Dana's property and immediately recognized these same strips of white cloth that Polly's friends had been tied up with. Dana had actually been in contact with the police prior. In fact, she'd actually been in contact with them on the night of Polly's abduction. So Dana's nanny had left as soon as Dana had returned home, and she encountered this strange man on the private road that led to Dana's property. And he got really kind of like aggressive with her. He yelled at her. He wanted her to stop. He wanted help because his car had ran into a ditch. And he gave her all of the freak alarm red bell vibes. And she was really, really scared. So she didn't stop. She drove to the closest gas station. She called Dana and basically told her, like, hey, there's a stranger on your road. And Dana put her kids in the car, drove out of there, and immediately called police because she was not going to be home alone as a single mom with a random man possibly potentially coming to break into her home. So she had called the police about this incident. So the night that happened, police encountered Richard Allen Davis in his Ford Pinto, which had run off the road. Okay, so we're going to talk about Richard Allen Davis for a minute because I just want you to hear a little bit of this guy's backstory. Now, Richard, known as Rick to his family, was born the third out of 5 children to his parents Bob and Evelyn Davis on June 2nd of 1954. Evelyn was considered to be a really strict mom. I guess she even found Rick smoking cigarettes at one point in time, and her harsh punishment to like teach him a lesson was to burn his hand. So, yikes. Rick's parents divorced and Bob won custody of all 5 children because, according to Rick, Evelyn allegedly had immoral conduct in the presence of her children. I don't want to know what that means because it was bad enough that she lost custody of her kids. After Rick moved around a lot and it was hard on the kids, I mean, no stability, divorce, all this, it would be pretty traumatizing. Bob would get remarried to 3 women throughout Rick's childhood, but he didn't like any of his stepmothers. In fact, he said he resented them. And the thought behind this is that with his own mom being really, really cruel, not liking his stepmothers, he basically just grew like this contempt towards women and female in general. His just tendency towards them to be really violent would show up later on. Bob was even said to have like a mental instability. I guess he would see hallucinations and he would just walk out of his house with a gun and start shooting at these apparent objects or people or things or whatever it was that he was seeing. So I can imagine as a child, like the confusion. Your mom is mean to you. You're like, Dad's off outside shooting ghosts. I don't know what he's doing. It would just be really, really confusing. And then the lack of love and consistency would definitely lead to what I would consider misbehaving. But he was actually known as the mean boy. This is what I was saying about the animal situation. I guess he would find cats and like douse them in gasoline and then light them on fire. Rick even made a point to make sure that all the people he like encountered knew that he had a knife. And then if he encountered stray dogs, he would just like cut them. Like, I don't know if he would actually kill them, but like just cut them. I don't know. Really, really strange. And then by the time that Rick hit 17, he just had this long rap sheet of things that he had already, like his life of crime was already professional level. There was even the speculation at this one party where he attended. Now, he claims that this young 18-year-old was his girlfriend, and she had found out that she was going to get into the Navy. So she was really, really excited, decided to throw a party, and the party went off kind of without a hitch. But then as everybody started leaving, Davis with his friends basically told him, hey, I need to run back into the house. And shortly later, they said they heard a shot ring out. Now, when police came to investigate, they found this young woman lying on the floor surrounded by letters about how she was going to unalive herself. So they basically like open and shut case that this had been self-inflicted. But the people who knew Davis around were like, it would not, like, we wouldn't put it past him to hold a gun to her and force her to write these letters and then kill her. And it just doesn't make sense. I mean, the girl's excited. She's going to go into the Navy. She even throws a party about it, but then she has a change of heart like immediately after people leave. Like, as they say, the math is not mathing. It doesn't add up. Doesn't make sense. But the police, of course, it's open and shut, I guess. Davis was even caught a few weeks later attempting to sell and pawn off some stolen items that he had confess to these burglaries. But basically, he goes on to say, like, it was out of sheer survival mode. He was hungry. He needed to steal so that he could get money so that he could eat. Now, technically, this could have actually been accurate because he had already had such a rap sheet. People were not wanting to hire him. So, this actually could have been one of the truthful things that he told police. But nevertheless, he spent some time for doing those crimes and then was released. 5 weeks after he was released for this arrest, he was caught in another burglary, getting sentenced. Basically, the sentence that he had could have been up to 15 years, but he only served 2 years. And this seems to be what keeps happening. It's like catch and release, catch and release. So he commits a crime. They're like, hey, we're going to give you like 15 years for this crime. And then he gets out in like 2 years. And I wouldn't say it's for good behavior. I mean, everybody that talks about him basically talks about how mean he is. So I'm not really sure why he kept getting out of jail so quickly. So this pattern of being arrested and released over and over again would continue, and Davis's crimes would just continue to escalate in nature. At one point, he saw a woman, and he claims that he heard the voice of this woman in his head and how she basically wanted to be raped. So he attempts to rape this woman, but luckily the young woman gets out of the car with minimal injuries, and she flags down a passing car who just so happens to be a sheriff on his way into work. Like, your guardian angel was looking out for you. So then, same night, I guess he scurries away. He doesn't get caught at this time, but the girl gets saved. Scurries away, and he then breaks into a 32-year-old woman's house where, again, he hears a voice in his head, a female voice, mind you, that basically wants him to bash her in the head. So he thinks, according to what he told police, he's just helping these women. Like, he's doing what the women want him to do. He actually is said when interviewed by a psychologist. Like, sorry, I'm laughing because it's so awkward. It's awkward to think that somebody is walking around having thoughts like that, if that's actually accurate. Please, if you hear me in your head, just ignore it. It's not me. Like, that's so awkward. I don't know. But anyways, for his attempt at this rape and assault, he basically, the sentence for that, I don't know why it varied so largely, but they said in the article 1 to 25 years, and then an additional 6 to 10 months for stolen property that he found that he was in possession of. So out of that huge amount of time he could have gone to jail, he ends up only serving 6 years, and he's released March 4th, 1982. Once he's released, he wastes no time getting back into his crime spree, and even took on a girlfriend named Sue Edwards. Now, she is like his partner in crime. They are drug dealing together. They're robbing stores and restaurants together. They are breaking into people's houses together. Like, they had this whole little Bonnie and Clyde spiel going on, which I could do a whole entire episode about just the two of these on their crime spree. That's how massive their rap sheet is. Davis basically gets pulled over for a busted taillight, and the officer runs the plates, finds warrants for his arrest, and just takes Rick off to jail. He would be sentenced to 16 years in prison for these outstanding warrants. So this was the man. All of that I've given you in brief detail, remember, this is only like a portion of his crime spree. This is the man that police encounter that night that Polly went missing. This monster of a man in the driveway of a single mother's home with children. Late at night, he is covered in leaves and dirt, and he's panting, and he's breathing heavy. And the police are like, why are you out here? And his response is that he's sightseeing at 11:30 at night. So suspicions arise with the law enforcement that's there on the side of the road with him, but they're looking around and they don't notice anything. They're like, there's no little girl with him. There's no, like, he's just this weirdo on the side of the road. So they basically tell him he has to promise to leave the property and never return. Like, imagine the days. Imagine the days where the police are like, you better promise to not be naughty. And you're like, I promise. And they're like, bye. It's wild. It is wild, man. The 90s were wild. So police let him go on his way. They have no reason to hold him. And unfortunately, just 25 miles to the neighboring town next to them, they didn't even have any idea about Polly's situation, because at the time there was no Amber Alerts, and police, especially in different cities and like counties, they were not all on the same radio station wavelength. So they actually had no idea. Otherwise, they would have known not only the description of the man, but that there was a missing child. And they didn't have any knowledge of that at the time. So here's just this guy. I mean, they can't like arrest him and be like, we're gonna hold you till we figure out if there's any missing people. So they send him on his way, and he slips through the cracks. But the thought is, at the time, looking back, that Polly was probably already deceased at this time, and that Davis was actually headed back to collect her body when he broke down on the private road. So when Dana had made this second call about these suspicious items that she found on her property, the police made the connection finally and started looking into the background of Richard Davis and why he was there on the night of Polly's abduction, why he was out on that road. And Richard even matched the description of the sketch artist's drawing, like to the T. Like, this guy was like, yo, this is you. Like, this is you. So the facts of this case were super frustrating, super duper frustrating, because Davis had been in the presence of these police twice since the disappearance of Polly Class. The night on the property incident, and then later on October 19th, he had been pulled over for the driving under the influence. So he was arrested. Now, some of the articles say under the influence, while other ones talk about that tail light that was out. So I don't know if those are actually the same incident. Like, maybe he was pulled over for the tail light, then they realized he was under the influence, and that's how he got arrested. But he was even in the jails where they had these flyers of Polly and the abductor, and like nobody made the connection. It's like that when you're watching the movie and the people keep crossing paths and you're like, they're right there. And you get like super frustrated. This was like the real life scenario here. Like, he's in jail with the poster. Like, come on. Like, police. Frustrating. So Davis is still claiming to know absolutely nothing about Polly, but the police have now figured out the connections, and they took full handprint. And guess what? His palm matches the partial handprint found at the crime scene. So they've proven that Richard is now the kidnapper, but it's like, where's Polly? This is the confession that Richard Allen Davis gives to the police, which is that's the sound of my head shaking. He says basically, when driving to Petaluma that night, he had planned to see his mother, but he didn't know where his mother lived. So naturally, that somehow leads to him running into a drug dealer, and he's like, I'm just going to buy some Mary Jane. But the Mary Jane is laced with PCP. So from here on out, he basically is like, I was so high on PCP that I don't know, foggy memory. So the details are kind of fuzzy. And he basically goes on to say that, like, he doesn't even remember breaking into the girls' house. He doesn't remember kidnapping Polly. And like I would never do this. But then I'm driving around and all of a sudden I realize I got a kid in my car who's tied up and like gagged. So he claims that he's driving around trying to figure out, what am I going to do with this kidnapped kid? And just out of the goodness of his heart, he takes the restraints off and ungags her. And then he's out on this private road and he's like, I'm going to just leave her on the side of the road and walk away from the situation. So he claims that he leaves her alive, unharmed on the side of the road. Then he has the encounter with the police at this time, and after decides, oh, like, I should probably go back and check on her and make sure she's okay. And he drives back and encounters her, and she's like asleep on the side of the road, and she wakes up to him coming, and it's like, oh, you left me here. I'm so glad you're back. And then what? And then what? What happened? Because that's the story he gave. And of course the police are like, that's awfully suspicious. That's a suspicious story that you're giving us. Like, we ain't buying it. And so basically he realizes that nobody's buying that story. It's a bunch of made up hokey baloney. I don't know what kind of PCP you were on, but that did not happen. So after his arrest, he realizes, like, you're going down. You're going down for kidnapping. We got your palm print. So he decides that he's going to take them out to the burial site, which even the detective noticed. Like, he's just like, he's smoking a cigarette. He's like, turn there at the tree right over there. Right? Like, just like, yeah. I mean, you know where you buried her, but you were like, you can't remember nothing. So they find her, and they realize her skirt is pulled up and her legs are spread apart, even though the body had severely decomposition. So they're like, hey, did you sexually assault her? And he's like, I don't really know. No memory, remember? No memory. But they did find a condom out of the wrapper in close proximity. Unfortunately, Polly's body had been out in the elements for 2 months. So there was a lot of damage to her body, and they could not really tell what had happened to her. There was no really like DNA evidence, all that stuff. It kind of been like decomposition is what I'm meaning to say. So Davis basically comes back with the story that he got behind her and he strangled her to death with the cloth. The corpse of Polly and the evidence surrounding gave the coroners enough evidence to realize that this was probably the true incident. But like I said, there was no like definite answer. So Polly was buried in her makeshift location off of Highway 101 near Cloverdale. Davis never to this day has given an exact timeline of events. So it's really unfortunate. It's heartbreaking. Luckily, he went to trial. The prosecution basically they just laid it all out for the jury. And he was found guilty on June 18th of 1996. So 3 years after she was taken. He was convicted of kidnapping and lewd acts and first-degree murder. Now, when he heard the verdict that he was basically going to get the death sentence, he literally turns to the jury and both hands, middle finger, the biggest screw you that he could give them, showing that he absolutely had no remorse. This made the judge just solidify like that much more. Like, he's like, this is going to be easy sentencing because I don't feel bad for you at all. And like, you're just a horrible human being. Horrible. So he is still, to this day, remains in San Quentin on death row. Now, Winona Ryder, who had got previously involved, she again felt so connected that she decided that her up-and-coming role on Little Women would be dedicated to the life and memory of Polly. And because of this case, this actually changed the way that the police departments communicated with districts and surrounding counties. And then they, from that like situation on, had a statewide centralized system so that they could hear these broadcastings of things that ended up turning into like Amber Alerts and those kinds of things. So at least there was some good that came out of this. There was also a law that was like came out of all of this, and it was called the Three Strikes Law, which there is kind of some controversy about. People, like, some people like really love it and other people are not thrilled about it. But basically, a criminal who's convicted of 3 felonies, it's like 3 strikes you're out. So third felony and you're like life in prison. So the people that don't like it feel that there are people who've committed like 3 crimes that are not worthy of life sentences, and now they are in jail for life. But this really came out of the fact that Davis had been in and out of jail so many times. And it was like, why are you on the streets? Why are you not, like, when they say 25 years, why are you getting out in 2 years? Like, it was just so frustrating. So people really wanted answers. And that's where the 3 strikes law came out of. Mark, Polly's dad, Mark Class. So he started Class Kids Foundation to honor in the memory of his beloved daughter, and the foundation would be dedicated to helping families search for missing children and people who were affected by crimes against children. And this foundation is actually still out there today, and you can look it up and support it. And I would definitely say to at least go, maybe share it around, because Polly's case happened really so long ago. Like, I don't even know if the younger generation has any idea who she is. And it's just one more reason why I really felt like doing this case, to like get it back out in the public view, or public knowledge, about who she was and why the Class Kids Foundation is even around, and you probably have never even heard of it. So there's that. And I really hope that I will be able to support them myself. So let me know what your thoughts were on this case. What do you think about the 3 strikes law? What do you think about Davis, like, every time turning around being released, like catch and release? What do you think about, like, what do you think about people just walking randomly up into your house? Like, oh my goodness. I don't know. It's just, this case is wild. It's wild. And I am still shaken up after all these years on just the fact that this happened, and it's crazy. And like, golly, it made me like Winona Ryder a whole lot more. I always thought she was a great actress, but like, that's just like when you find out an actress or an actor does something cool and stands up, like, it puts your heart in a good place. So, but yeah, let me know what your thoughts were. Leave it down below. Also, if you have a case that you want me to cover that maybe you have not heard about, or maybe it's a case in your local area and it's not getting the coverage that you think that it deserves, please message me, because I would love to look into it. Until next time, stay safe. Until next time, stay safe, and we'll talk again soon. I don't like that outro. Let me try again. Until next time, stay safe out there, weirdos. Okay, wait. No, maybe not that one. Until next time, stay safe, and we'll catch you later. Ugh. Y'all, I need help with my outro. It's poo-poo. I don't like it.